All right.
Let us do this. So component did mount. Where's our? Here's our rating. All right. So let's.
Oh, it's so good. Damn, it takes so long.
I'm just gonna switch this over. I'm gonna get rid of this. And we're gonna have button. Button. Dot is dark. Times 5. Why didn't I do my times 5?
Did you do button star 5? Yeah.
Haha.
Hey, Mark, we're recording.
We are.
Yes. Quit. Oh my god, this mail app fucking built into Mac is gonna just.
Is it gonna be awesome or terrible?
It's terrible. I mean,
It's the
it's
worst.
really awesome.
It's the worst.
It's really awesome, except for like it will not leave me alone.
No, it won't.
So intrusive.
It's super intrusive.
Can you delete it from your computer?
I feel like only Microsoft allows you to actually delete things. Apple's like, yeah, it's deleted, but it's just really just making.
I don't think either platform does that.
Well, you can go into the program and straight uninstall the program on Microsoft. I don't know how to do that in Mac.
This does not give you the option to move it to trash. Clearly.
5 buttons. Do they have a hover effect? Mm-hmm.
Voice.
So what would does it?
Yeah.
It does. Okay, cool. It does. How about that? I want to get rid of that border radius though.
It's just
So do we want to get rid of the border radius, or do we want to give them space? Both. Okay.
No, the border radius is fine if we give a little space.
How much space should we put there?
Should just get rid of the background altogether and just give it a slight opacity when they're not clicked and when they click. Each one gets full opacity depending on which one you click.
We could.
Hmm?
We could.
It's a lot of work for a button.
That's not that much.
You should let Justin drive.
It's good, but it's not what we're after. So let's give this thing button is dark. That's what it did, right? Let's give y'all a margin of 0.5 m.
How come you don't ever use pixel? You just don't like to? It's just your style?
If I'm ever doing pixels, then I'm doing something wrong.
Whenever,
Like 2
every
pixels.
time you're doing CSS, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I hate this. That mean. It's kind of right. But now, how do we? How do we the 4 or 5? Do we just get rid of that?
That's the current rating.
Yeah, that's the current rating. Let's move that up to.
The power again?
Yep. And switch it to an H3. Whoop.
Wow. I love it.
It's not dynamic, so let's make it dynamic.
I love
It's dot state dot location dot rating.
That means we gotta make each button hooked up to a put.
So we don't need this add rating button anymore because the reason going to be buttons. Mm-hmm.
The one thing that's not.
Does it look like they're off center?
They are off.
Everything is off center.
But the coffee's off center. Why is the coffee off center?
Text line center.
Is there an extra space there? There's an extra space there.
What did you change?
The fourth one? But it still didn't give me it.
Oh, I see what you mean. The actual cup.
Yeah, the actual cup is off center.
No.
Texas Online Center.
But
Thank you.
Mm. What? Nope.
Yeah, this stands within the
Yeah.
Andrew, is it there?
It was gone by the time I left.
Or was it ever really there?
banana looks so bad.
The bear shit on the webpage.
I feel like that's like a domain. Does the bear show on what
That's so funny. Let's copy it right now. Go to the site and copy it. Oh man, that's the one.
That is crazy. I wish I could hook
That's
that.
the one.
That would be a thing about like scatology. The
Scatology.
study of animal shit.
Yeah.
My my camp coach, I guess you would call him, the leader or whatever,
Counselor.
counselor, thank you, played a trick on us when we were, was teaching us all about scat. And we rolled around.
Just get rid of the background and the color,
Put it
and
out
you
in the
can't
dirt.
tell
That's true.
where it is.
Like teaching us how you can tell the difference. Look inside, and he eats it.
But-
We're all like,
Oh man, that'd be hilarious. That's a good trick. He's
I'm
like,
gonna come back and like that's not really what I want to talk about today, but like that's gonna bug me until we get this done.
What is it? The
the
dynamic
cups.
cups.
The cups are not
The
centered.
cups are not centered in it.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Maybe if you used pixel on the padding left.
With ta-da!
Still not centered.
Still not fucking centered.
Could it? Does it have anything to do with? No, never mind. I was gonna say how
It's
long
center.
the window is, but no, it's not. That's not
Nope, that's gonna just.
true.
Never mind.
Which way is up and down?
Why is that not working?
Is it a junior developer doing it for you?
Almost.
You want? Yeah.
We all got our own opinions, I think, man.
It's gotta be
It just
padding.
seems like the picture itself is off center because of the handle.
Yeah, like looking at what's being calculated here. Like, there's no.
Any padding on it?
No,
Do you want to put some padding on it?
I could.
So a little left padding.
Little padding on the left, you said?
Yeah.
Padding left.
1 pixel.
That's centered.
I'll take it.
It definitely did say that. You didn't ignore me. A little offended.
Good. Dot button dot is dark span. Because that feels like a hack to me. That's why.
That's what you're gonna
Like
do.
it doesn't
Pretty
feel.
centered.
It doesn't feel like the way to do it because I'm like counting pixels now. But you know what? For right now, at 9:45 in the morning, we're going to talk about how to add a rating system. I'm pretty good with that.
Good.
So let's talk about this rating system for a second. What do we want to do? So we want to store the rating of the users, right? Do we want to store all the ratings? So I guess how do we want to calculate this number right here?
It's an average.
So we want it to be an average of all the ratings stored. So we need to store all the ratings somehow. We need to kind of do something for this. Because we need to know how many ratings there are, what's the total ratings. Right now, our data model doesn't support that. Because right now, our data model just says we have a rating, and that's it, which is just a number. So how do we think we should solve this?
It has to do with like the clicks or like an average of the clicks on the cups, and that's like dynamically going to the numerator on the fraction.
Each cup has a value.
Yeah, each couple of value, each couple of posts, like that's fine. I don't know how do we store it?
I'm thinking,
Because that's really because like we can hook up each button, be like, oh, this button sends a 1 rating, this one sends a 5 rating. We can send that's
And they each have to lay their own post, or would it just be on click that sends the value through?
maybe not clicks in better. Like this part's easy. That part's hard.
needs its own table.
What part?
The database part. How we solve it. Because that's gonna be the
You're
average.
putting the CSS.
Oh. No, I was
It's gonna need its own table
so the first idea we have is to give it its own table.
with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in there.
Or can we add the locations?
Yeah. So like we could have another table. This is kind of we're gonna explore that in a second. Just we could have another table called a ratings table, right? And on this table, what would go here?
You need like ID,
ID,
location ID.
location ID.
Wait. We got
Yes.
location ID, yes. What? Yes. And then 1 cup, 2
Yeah.
cup, 3 cup.
And the actual
4 cup.
rating.
So number.
So would we need, so my question is, will we need a rating or will we need individual rating on 1?
So like if we all go in, so under this system, if the 5 of us will go in and rate one place, we're gonna have 5 ratings.
Okay, that's
Like rating IDs, technically.
Yeah.
so that's what we need. And then we need it up here, we need the rating ID.
Do we?
I don't
Oh
know.
no, I guess not, we can just, we don't need a location at all.
No, we can actually get rid of that. So that's one idea. Justin, do you have another idea? Or
Well, I don't see why you can't go to just be add another column of locations table
what would that column be?
rating.
We already have a rating. We already have a rating column. But we need to make this the average of the rating. So what we could do, and none of this kind of riffing here, so if I say I'm sorry, 10 minutes, I'm sorry. But we could store the total number of ratings, the total number, store the current average rating, and then the total rating. So every time someone would add a rating, we increment this one by 1, and increment this by whatever the new rating is.
And that's how we're gonna get the average.
And then we just use this as a calculated field based off of these 2 values.
I like that.
So there's 2 different solutions here. We have a whole new table, or we have this right here.
Seems like a whole waste of space to add a whole bunch of save every single rating.
So this one is better for space. You're absolutely correct on that. Because we're like, oh, we're only storing the rating, that's it. This one, though, is better for tracking who rated who. Because eventually, once we add users to this, once we have the ability to log in, this is also going to have a user ID.
Right.
Are we going to be tracking, like I guess when we do the math for the average, are we going to divide by like the number of IDs for ratings we've accumulated, or how are we going to generate like the denominator for the rating?
Yeah, we would just do a count on how many are here.
Okay, so yeah, okay.
Add them all up. Divide by how many are there.
Yep.
If there's 3 there, if there's 3 ratings and it's 15, that's 5-star rating.
Yeah.
I don't know. I personally think another table to deal with this is the way to go, rather than trying to squish it all into location.
Yeah. Yes, I would probably agree with you. I like this because it seems simpler, it's kind of more straightforward, and kind of a bit more abstract. But we care who rates. We probably
One day,
one day,
not this week.
Tuesday or Wednesday.
One day, as in literally Tuesday.
So let's so go back to our original data model here.
Do we have a black one? That blue is hard to
We do have a
It's fine.
so we're gonna get rid of rating. We're gonna get rid of rating. We're gonna add a new rating table.
Okay.
So let's do this.
Don't we don't want to link the table to the rating.
We will. We will. We're gonna. That's what that location ID is. That is really hard to read it from over here.
Mhm.
It was easy for me to read over there, but from this angle, can't read that at all. So yeah, let's come back over here to our models. So we're gonna add a new model. What do I have here? Updated rating layout. Mm-hmm. So models, rating.cs, namespace.
Is copy ship API, right?
Yep. Models, public class rating. We have prop int ID, prop int location ID, and prop int.
For rating,
Yeah, this is the actual rating.
yes. It's always going to be a whole number too, the actual rating too.
Will it? In our current UI, it is.
Mm-hmm.
But will it
The
be?
rating it's receiving is going to be a whole number. The rating that actually is not going to be.
Do we,
The average isn't going to be a whole number.
do we want to give our users the ability to add, like 4.5?
No.
No. Okay.
I mean,
There is no right or wrong answer to that.
Mine-
It's like how do you?
Have you ever? How many? So 4.5 stars.
4.5 stars.
there's a
Can I was looking to say, can I do this on Google?
You mean yes,
Meant by half stars,
absolutely.
Just like the rating overall be.
You absolutely can.
Can
Oh,
I?
wait, no, I think you can.
No, on Google you can't.
The average can be 3.5 stars, 4.2 stars.
But you have to select a whole number of stars.
Okay. Sounds good.
So then the actual rating average will be a double.
Correct. So we're good with an int.
Yeah, for rating.
Mhm.
Score.
So let's add our navigation property here.
For score.
Yeah, score. That's what we're storing the actual rating as.
Okay.
I tend to shy away from naming my properties the same as my classes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Just because, like, if that's ever the thing, I really need to kind of check my data model and go, like, is this really what I have? That's kind of like a good rule of thumb, kind of good guideline. Like, if you have trouble naming something, something's off.
Okay.
You know, you're probably, not all the time, but you might be down a wrong path.
Okay.
Shouldn't public class be ratings? And then you can name that
No,
rating.
because it's rated.
No, because it's still the same word, so rating. You're still using ratings and rating and ratings to me are still the same word. So we have that. Let's head over to our location. We're actually going to get rid of rating.
And now it's going to be public rating, or now it's going to be rating ID.
And then the similar way how we did over here on franchise, we said one franchise has many locations. We're going to come over here to location and do prop list of ratings. And now just give us a list of ratings.
Cool.
Then let's add.
Set ratings.
Yep. Prop db set rating
And ratings.
All right, are we happy with this?
Sounds good.
Do we have our average in locations yet?
We do not, Alan. Great observation. So we have two. we have a couple of ways to do this. Because of how we set up our data model, if we want the rating, we need to do a join on the locations to get it out. Okay. So we can either do that calculation client side or we can do it server side.
Server
Client
side.
side. Sorry.
So debate why. Defend your positions.
I know why. So I'll let you.
Go for it, dude. No, go for it.
My theory is that I don't want a bunch of logic on my database. It's a database. Store my information. I'll do the logic on the front end side. I'll do the math or do the averaging and stuff on the user side.
Okay.
I just want my database to store my data.
Okay.
That's just my.
So in your world, your server is literally as dumb as possible.
Yeah.
It's only just here's my data, take it. Here's my data, take it.
I'm going to make the exact opposite argument because chances are the server is going to have a much more processing power than the user. And depending on how complex for something like this, maybe it doesn't make much difference. But if you're pulling in a bunch of data that needs to be processed in some way, it probably makes sense to do that
But that's a
there and then send the processed data.
that's a completely different argument for this thing because we're talking about average rating, not super complex. I mean, in this instance, in this situation.
In this, it probably doesn't matter much
I
here.
don't mean that as a universal statement. I just mean for the coffee shop. Yeah.
But but if we're trying to do the average, we might want to store that average data. So if we wanted to make a query about what the average data is. But again, we already have all the ratings, so is that really something we want to store or just something that we want to have a function give a value?
That's what I was gonna say. If you want to find the average, all the ratings are there. You just run the function to do the average.
So the question is, where is the function?
It is. Yeah, that's
Front end or back end?
Yeah.
Front end. That's what I mean. You just all the ratings are here. Cool. Let me run a function to get the average. Unless instead of saying, hey, let me do all this work in the database just so I can query the average.
I originally
All the
said
numbers
server.
are in the database, so it should be done in the database.
I originally said server because I believe that it would make it more organized if it was all on the server. That was the reason I said it. But I do think Alan makes a good point. I think that it might be less complicated if we do it on the client side, but
I think the user might get a. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just gonna say, but I really don't know. So that was the reason I said it.
This is so much fun to watch. I wish I could have recorded that because y'all sound like
I'm not recording.
Really?
oh, I'm recording it. Go back and listen to yourself.
Introduce yourself.
Like you're like awesome and like just so we say there's actually no wrong answer here.
Okay.
Preferences. Cool.
Yeah, like it's
Whoever has rank, pull rank, bitch. This is what we're doing.
it's really what's the best way to solve this problem. So like Gabe brings up a good point. Like servers are usually beefier, so let's just kind of use that to our advantage. If the datas are huge and ratings are probably going to be pretty big. So like that ratings table is probably going to get pretty big.
Yes.
Yeah,
This
it's
is-
massive.
This is the backend's problem.
So like yeah, that's the server's problem. So like the server has to we have to manage that somehow. Is how do we do that? That being said, is that a problem yet? If we're making a rating system just for St. Pete, like how many ratings are we actually going to have?
How complex is finding the average of something? I mean, I feel like
It's not that complex, but it can be intensive depending on how many data points you have.
It's really just like a sum over
at
a
what
sum.
point does it become intensive? 10 million? 100 million?
I don't know.
We don't know. So there's two trains of thought here. The first train of thought is that let's actually test this system and find out. We have the time, we have the bandwidth. That's the correct way, the bandwidth to do that. So let's stand up a database, let's insert 10 million rows and actually run it. Like that's the thing. The other school of thought is, does it work with our current data set? Awesome, ship it. That's one of those like, oh, we need to stand up something now to get it in.
Cool. Bang important works right now. Ship it.
Exactly. Like,
But then
and that's really the mentality between like a startup company and a enterprise company. The enterprise company should be like, hey, you know what? We have the time. We can ship it a week later. That's perfectly fine. Take time to test it. See what our limits are. But the startup's like, we need to get to market tonight. You know, let's
Last
bang.
week.
Yeah, like we need to get to market now in order to hit it big. So let's bang importance. Let's stand it up and ship it. Let's make sure it works. Instagram is actually a very fun story because like they weren't expecting to blow up like the way they did. Like they weren't expecting it to get so popular. So they had their database engineers like furiously restructuring the architecture as they were exploding. So like,
God, did they crash?
That's the wrong way to do it.
what?
Did they crash a bunch?
That's a
They
good.
they crashed a few
problem to
times,
have.
but they were up immediately. They were sharding databases. They were like
That's a
turning up
good
instances,
problem
throwing memory out. Like, yeah, oh, it's a great problem to have. Like,
to have. It's like the Teslas being like 6 months away from being able to get you a freaking car.
yeah,
Sucks they don't have them, but also that's a great problem to have. Like we're booked for 6
Right.
weeks.
right. Like, it's like that's one of those like we deal with it whenever we get there. One of the bane of programmers is pre-optimizations. It's always good to have a conversation though. It's always good to know the different like viewpoints. Like, what's the cost if we do it on the server? What's the cost if we do it on the client? What's the cost if we do it outside of our API? Do we want our API to be the book of truth?
Where would it be hitting of the client doing that calculation? Would it be hitting their
Web browser
bandwidth? It'd be hitting their web browser.
and bandwidth, because they need to not only download all of the ratings, but they also have to do the actual calculations.
So it definitely makes a lot more sense to do the back end. Get the
I mean-
calculations done before you send it out.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the user then gets a faster experience.
Yeah.
Even if it is, in this case,
Mhm.
like half a millisecond.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still disagree. I think that's fine. Let them.
Yeah, if there's a million ratings, that would be ridiculous.
Yeah. So it's like how
That would be ridiculous to send it to the user's client side.
it would like it's a lot going on there.
That's true. Download a million
Mhm.
numbers.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not that big. How fast is it?
A million's big. I'm gonna send you a million item JSON file and see what happens.
You should. I'd be interested to see what happens. I really would be.
Can I write a function to do that?
Yeah.
Like, you should.
Our other
I'd be
thing would
interested
have
to see,
done that.
honestly. I would be. See what that's like. I mean,
Wouldn't our
Can you
file,
write a function that
60
just repeats a
million
line code a
hits.
million times? That's a lot of work.
wouldn't our function have done that if we didn't
it'd be like
put that
16 gigs.
blocker in there?
Right.
Like 16 gigs.
It would
Million
be-
lines of code.
Make that picture repeat itself
Actually,
a
be
million
more
times so
like
you have a computer.
60.
Yeah, like it would do a lot of things. Like writing a for loop while I is less than a million plus. You know, like.
Okay. All right.
Or
All right. Well,
But-
fair enough. Let's do it in the back end then, so I can see how that be done.
Yeah. So it's kind of
because they're always going to send it to you.
so yeah, we'll kind of rock out with this. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Let's get our database migrated first. Let's do that before we get too far. Why do
Oh,
we?
we got build errors.
We do
Broke it. Alan, what did you do?
Oh, we will have build errors because our ratings no longer exist inside of our seed data.
If you highlight it in Command D, you get all of them at once.
I mean, we can highlight the whole thing just to the beginning of it.
Now, if you do Command B, you should be able to. Like, well.
No.
No more rules errors.
So .NET EF database migrations add in readings table.
We're still that same school of thought with having another table, the way our data model is set up, is that slower?
No.
It's just a data table, right? It's
Yeah.
like just like little.
Well, but we're talking milliseconds, it's gotta generate another email, we gotta it's gotta send that up.
But like, are they milliseconds or are they like nanoseconds?
I don't know. I don't know, I'm not computer science.
Adding it into an actual table like that is not really the issue. So like we're kind of dancing around like our problem isn't storing, our problem is reading the data.
Okay.
So it's how do we kind of set us up for success in getting that average.
So when you're thinking of database, you don't necessarily have to think, just store it in the way that makes sense for you. You don't have to really think about optimization of that part of it, just accessing the data is where you gotta think about
It's-
optimization.
So the two big operations you're going to be doing on your database, let's just kind of like be real for a second. You're going to be reading it, and you're going to be inserting and updating. You're going to be inserting, you're going to be adding to it and reading it out. If you're doing any sort of calculations with that, there's going to be some sort of cost somewhere. That's just what it is. Like if we want to find the average rating, we either need to calculate it on the way out, or we can calculate it on the way in, which is something that we might get to in a little bit. So that's kind of the idea that I like the best, is kind of calculate it on the way in.
Makes the most sense.
So like whenever we get a new rating, then we update it.
Update it.
So then whenever we go to access it, we don't have to go through the million lines of code every time. Yeah, leaving a review is a bit slower, but comparatively what we're doing, we're going to be reading it a lot more times than we're going to be updating. So,
Yeah, but they'll be updating while they're not waiting for to receive anything, so it'll really be slower.
exactly. Like the user won't expect that. Like, oh, we're sending out my data. It should be a little bit slower. Versus I'm just reading it on a website. My website should be fast.
I definitely would expect writing something to be slower than reading. So,
And the whole like mythical 3 seconds rule, like that's a thing.
Mythical is 3 seconds.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's if your page doesn't load in 3 seconds, then you've lost users.
That's probably not mythical.
People are saying it's actually shorter than that nowadays. But like
3 microseconds.
it's like if your page doesn't load instantly, like that's a problem.
If you see a blank screen at all,
Yeah.
it should be there instantly.
Yeah, like so like that's the thing.
So it's nice about React.
Which one's new?
did it?
Please review the
With the
migration.
date, it doesn't have a date on it, does it? 2018?
Guess what? The 8th. Here it is. Usually it shows up a different color.
Yeah, you should screen.
So we're dropping a column. That's fine. We are creating a table called ratings that has a primary key, locations, delete cascade. That's all good. So this looks good to me. Does it look good to y'all?
That's exactly what I wanted.
All right, let's do it. .NET EF database update. Cool deal. So now we have our database. Now we have something that's ready to receive data. Now let's kind of start lobbing data at it.
Okay. Okay.
I always
We can't hand it to it gently.
nope. Just start lobbing, start throwing shit at it.
Literally dropping bombs of data.
Yeah. I always like making a place to put the data and then start throwing stuff at it. I like doing my inserting and my updating before I do my reading.
Would you see data in this situation, or would you go to the front end and make it actually
No, I'd actually go in and make it happen.
make it happen?
Because like this, so C data I use for data that I need to get my apps point across. I don't need ratings to get my apps point across.
True.
I need locations to get my apps point across. But again, that's a judgment call, and I could be proven wrong. And like, yeah, well, sure. That's not. I wouldn't die on that. On
that sort.
Because like, I'm not gonna die on that. If you want to add word seed data, okay, I'll take 10 minutes. It's actually it's 10:11. How are you feeling? Do you want to take a quick?
I'd love a
Yes.
cup of coffee and a quick break.
So 9-minute break. Come back at 10:20, and we'll start logging data to our stuff.